everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our author event tonight, our book talk. We're very pleased to have, do you prefer Sue or Susan?
Sue.
Sue, I thought so.
Always Susan.
We're very pleased to have Sue Kehoe here, not only as an author of an excellent book that gives you a real feel for what Ireland is like in its history, but also because Sue's one of our friends of the library, so she's helping us out in so many ways. So thank you, Sue, for coming, and I will leave it to you.
So my name is Sue. We'll keep this informal and let's hope we have an hour of fun. I thank you all very much for coming out. This is my very first book and my very first author's night, so in 2014 I went on a vacation with a friend of mine. She said, "You want to come to Ireland?" I said, "Sure." So we spent 12 days on a bus with 43 Americans. Ireland was phenomenal. I have never been to a country that affected me the way Ireland has. It's a little bigger than New Brunswick, but not by much. It's green, it's rocky, it's so rocky it makes Bancroft look tame. The people are super interesting. The history is awful. I suppose most of Europe is. I think Canada has been in its own way, but not the way it's been in Ireland, as far as I can see. The history has been bloody. The slaughter has been phenomenal. I mean, the bus driver is pointing at a wonderful cathedral and a gorgeous old tree that's about 70 feet high, and he says there are 2,000 babies buried under that tree. And you stop and you try to put those sorts of numbers into some kind of perspective. And then you hear tales of the famine, which was another, millions of people died. And fortunately, some of them, well, a lot died at sea trying to get to somewhere safe. A lot of them came here, and the bonus that we got for it is that we got a lot of very strong people who became some of our first pioneers. All you have to look at is O'Hara Mill, just locally, to see. I mean, their firstborn son was the first white child born in this area. And I'm sure the rigors of a Canadian winter were different from what they'd experienced at home. But they finally got to own a piece of land, which they would never have been able to do back home. And as we drove around that island, one of the things that struck me the most was the ruins. Ruins everywhere. Castles, farmhouses, barns, mansions, where some wonderful building had been destroyed by some invader of some description. So I came home having had a fabulous time, met great people, loved the music. We got up, we danced, we sang terribly, but we thoroughly enjoyed it. We had a bus driver who I think, bless his heart, he was rather a stern man at times, but he knew every single pub in Ireland, I swear. He was very good. He was an excellent tour guide. I mean, he'd look out on the horizon and look at, he said, "See that ruin over there? That was built in 546 by St. Patrick." 546. And we're not even 200 years old over here. At least our culture isn't. So I came home with a whole lot more questions than I went with. And by the time I finished researching them, I thought, you know what? I've got enough here to write a book. Just because I enjoyed it so much. How many of you have been to Ireland? Did you enjoy it? Would you go back?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Are any of you Irish? Hey!
Irish descent.
Okay. Do you speak Gaelic?
No.
Because I don't know how to pronounce some of the words that are in that book. So this is basically, so what I have created is 10 short stories about various times and various people and how they, and they're ordinary people, they're not superheroes, but they may as well be because of what they went through and how they dealt with it and they survived it. And I think that is a lesson for all of us, is that ordinary people can survive, but ordinary people have absolutely amazing courage. Now, I'm a nurse by profession. I've been for a long time. And I'm just amazed at them. And I'm also, I was born in England, and one of the other things I learned when I was over there is that the English sometimes hold lies. They wrote the history books, unfortunately. So I found out that some of the things I learned as a child weren't true. And that horrified me. So I have quite a respect for these people, and I'd go back in a heartbeat. So I think maybe, and I've had a hard time deciding which story to pick, but I think I'll pick the very last one. It's called The Last Violin. Now this occurs in the city of Galway, and the date is August of 1651. Now just to put you in the frame, this is the time when Cromwell has invaded Ireland with his army. Cromwell is a very staunch English Protestant. He belongs to a political group that are trying to obtain a parliamentary form of government in England. And the King of England at the time is Charles I. Well, there was a war between Cromwell and Charles I, and Charles I was murdered. So our present government with the Queen as the head of state dates back to those times. And Cromwell went into Ireland with cannon and a very large army. And they basically would pick a town and totally destroy it, especially if the people were, number one, Catholic, and number two, were pro-royalists. If you were that combination, your life was done. It didn't matter whether you were a child, a woman, or a man, your days were gone. And he went all the way around, not himself personally, but his army went all around Ireland at the time and systematically did a form of genocide and killed most of them. By the time he rewrote the map, it took him about 10 years to do it. The only parts of Ireland that were Catholic were the parts that weren't worth having. The ones that were so rocky that you couldn't farm it, you couldn't do anything with it except raise a few sheep. So Galway was the last holdout for that. So this is where the story starts. Annie Morris lay in bed wide awake. Today she and her husband Wayne will be sending their two youngest children away forever. It was a decision that tore her heart out, but she knew what was coming. Cromwell's army would lay siege to Galway, and it would be slow death to all Catholics. 10 years earlier it had been the same, and thousands had died of starvation or the plague. Strawn and Fiona would be joining the Lynch's three sons on Captain Piera's ship to Spain, to freedom and safety. Later that morning, she stood on the wharf, clasping her daughter tightly. She could feel the sobs racking Fiona's body right through her coat. She blocked out the noises, The shouts of deckhands moving the last boxes, barrels and luggage up the gangplank. The sharp orders of the Spanish captain urging haste as he paced the deck, and the weeping of other families saying their goodbyes. Over Fiona's shoulder, she looked at her youngest son, not missing a detail. She saw a slim lad dressed in his good suit, a mop of unruly black curls framing the boy's serious face. I know deep in my heart I'm never going to see them again. Her husband Wayne was talking to him. Strong, take good care of your sister. Alden Lynch's family will be on board, so you'll be in good company, he said. You won't have any trouble finding a job in Spain. Good violin makers are a rarity. Son, I'm so proud of you, he said, pulling the lad to him in a fierce hug. Annie watched as Captain Pyre strode down the gangplank, the gold braid on his tri-cornered hat and uniform glittering. She knew the pistol and the gold-hilted sword strapped to his waist were no ornaments. Wayne's told me stories of him. Skilled with a sword he is. He's fought and killed pirates defending his ship back and forth from Spain to Galway, bringing us wine. He's a strong, arrogant man in the Spanish way with that trimmed goatee and dark skin. His eyes were everywhere and missed nothing. She watched him usher the 3 young Lynch boys aboard, then the 3 Frenches. This will likely be the last boat to escape before the blockade starts. Strong grasped his father and squeezed him tightly. The 6 violins you've given us should give us a good start. They always sell well in Europe. Thanks, Dad. I'm going to miss you all, he said, choking out the words as he came and kissed her goodbye. Squaring his shoulders, Strong gently disengaged Fiona from her father and guided her up the gangplank, the hem of her long skirt swishing against the railings. Annie watched as Pyre and Wayne shook hands. Then the captain returned to his ship. It was the captain who brought him his first Italian violin 20 years ago. Dwayne had been making the tin ones then. I remember him taking it apart to see how it was made, and it took him years to master it, but now he's got quite a reputation for his violins. She watched as Strong and Fiona turned to look back over the rail. Her last view of Fiona was the tear-stained face and the rich, dark auburn hair cascading over Annie's hand-knit Galway shawl. An officer shepherded him down to the lower deck out of sight and away from the bustle of departure. Swarthy, agile seamen unwound the hoses from the dock cleats, then holding the gangplank. Others swarmed the yard arms barefoot, unfurling the sails. A team of straining sailors pulled in the anchor in unison, its massive clanking chain rising from the seafloor, meshed with dripping seaweed. Slowly, the creaking ship pulled away from the dock as the salty breeze gradually filled the flapping sails, and the red and yellow Spanish flag fluttered. Gulls swooped and screamed, following the ship, leaving the crowd at dockside to disperse. Annie and Wayne quietly joined the Lynch families, all eyes fixed on the receiving 3-master as it majestically rose to meet the line of white-capped waves where the calm waters of Galway Bay met the Atlantic. Arlen Lynch took Wayne aside, leaving their wives to commiserate their losses. Annie heard Arlen say, God willing, no, reach Spain safely. Things can only get worse here. Galway's the last holdout. Cromwell's boys are entrenched at Limerick, but we're next. I might be the richest of the 14 tribes, but once those damn parliamentarians arrive, I'll lose my land and all of my possessions like every other Catholic. God help us all. She heard the anger and frustration in his words. Some bloody English Protestant lord will be living in my house. Dwayne replied, Arlen, sending the children away is the hardest thing I've ever done. It is like tearing my own flesh, but I can only see starvation or worse ahead. Annie here won't leave, neither were Delvin or Miles, my other boys. We can only hope that Farrell can raise a force up in Connemara to back us. Annie briefly glanced at Thomas Preston, the military governor of Galway, astride his horse, supervising the loading of a mountain of supplies left by the ship for the waiting. To supply the garrison, protecting their 27 acres of walled temple. He's got 2,000 soldiers to feed, he thought she thought. Preston looked harried, deep worry lines in his forehead, and he shouted to his soldiers to keep the milling poor away from his food supply. She held Mrs. Lynch's hand for a moment, then squeezed it. Both of us are losing our children. We've got good defenses. The 12 cannon will keep them at bay, she heard Ireland say. But Coote's advance party is already digging a siege line between Lochatelli and Sakin, just north of us. I'll see you at church in the council meeting on Tuesday, he said, assisting his wife into a carriage with his uniformed driver. The pair of matched greys moved off at a brisk pace, parting the crowd and moving toward Lynch's castle, the stone 3-story tower house on Abbygate Road. Annie pictured the day the new cannons arrived. Wayne and Devlin had been fascinated, watching the massive 12-foot-long cast iron barrels being hoisted through the air to be carefully loaded onto the waiting gun carts. Teams of 8 horses had been needed to move them. It was quite a sight. Kegs of gunpowder and the cannonballs that had been arriving for weeks. Another war. It scares me. We lost so much the last time. They walked side by side, jostled by the throngs on the busy streets. Locals were buying whatever they could as supplies in the shops dwindled, and strangers were desperately looking for shelter. Gossip has it, said Annie, that Brown's mansion is now full of refugees. Hundreds of them broke in just to get out of the cold and the rain. The park's full too. It's such a shame. Those Limerick families once had lovely homes, and now look at them. Filthy, tattered clothing, sitting on boxes in makeshift tents and under the wagons with open fires and cooking pots. Their poor horses are so thin, there's nary a blade of grass to feed them anywhere within these walls. It could be us soon enough. How are we going to feed all these people? There must be hundreds here. They arrived at a short street with a solid row of 2-story houses. Their house was one of the middle ones. Inside, Devlin, their eldest son, was unloading herring from 2 pails and gutting them on the kitchen table. I managed to get fish from the Clatter across the river. They're bringing in as much as they can before they're blockaded. I was lucky to get that. It's a good thing we know you went over there for the peat and the fish. You put some aside for me. The Browns and Sweeneys were fighting down by the bridge for what was left. It's bedlam down there. Don't you be going out by yourself, Mom. I wasn't sure I was going to get home without someone slipping a knife between my ribs to steal my fish. So you got Sean and Fiona on their way? Annie nodded and slipped out of her coat. After adding another peat log on the fire, she put on her apron and stirred the pot of stew. Wayne hung his coat on the hook and changed into his working clothes. He took the glass from the coal oil lamp and wiped off the soot, trimmed the wick with a small pair of scissors and set it on the table. Annie watched Wayne as he wandered out to his workshop, lit his lamp and glanced at his workbench. She knew he'd be looking at the stacks of 20-year-old dried sycamore, pine and maple, destined to become his violins. His plain saws, wood clamps, sanders and bundles of horsehair for the bows hung neatly on the walls. I wonder if it will be alive for him to finish another one. She watched him run his hand over the framework of the newest creation, feeling the smoothness of the ribs as he removed the clamps holding into the back template. He then examined the form of the ribs and nodded, and she knew he'd spend the next hour looking for the right piece of wood to make the back. As always, it takes forever for him to find a piece with just the right feel and grain. With a sigh, she turned and stirred the stew again. She set the table with 6 bowls, then came back to reality. With a sharp intake of breath, she realized there were only 4 of them now, and a tear trickled down her cheek. Wiping it away with her sleeve, she caught Devlin watching them. I'm going to miss them a lot. He nodded and continued gutting the meat. Ma, it will be easier to feed 4 of us. He stood there with the shirt sleeves rolled up, the razor-sharp knife in one hand, and his forearm sprinkled with sparkling small fish scales. I think we've done all we can to prepare. We've double-barred the doors and shuttered the windows. We've got a barrel of salted fish, 1 of beef, flour, potatoes, grain, and that bushel of crab apples Miles managed to get. God willing, that will last us. I'm thankful we've got a walled garden. Our well in the peat pile should be safe. We then carried the 2 pails out to the workshop to add the silvery fish to the brine barrel. She could hear the low rumble of their voices. Deep in thought, she went out to the well to fill the pail. As evening comes, the town gets quiet. No barking. I think most of the dogs have been eaten. The stray cats have disappeared too. Wouldn't surprise me if they're trapping rats again. The 2 men came back into the kitchen half an hour later to the rising aroma of the stew. Loops of blood sausage were drying over the fireplace, shrinking and curing in the heat. She put her arms around Dwayne and he held her close. It's so quiet in here without Fiona, she said. It feels like she's still here. Look, she left some ribbon behind. I'm going to miss her cheery laugh and her temper when the boys teased her too much. Miles should be back soon. He's probably up at the King's Arm enjoying his last pint. Don't say that, Dwayne. We must get through this. She looked up at him, fingering the gold cross around her neck. We've survived the last 10 years. Do you want me to continue on this? You're in. Oh, okay. Look what happened in 42, he said, lighting the lamp and closing the shutters on the street to the invasive eyes of the street. We lost our house because we supported the king. If we can't hold out here, Cromwell and his damn parliamentarians will take everything. The Protestant families will just be fine, but we'll lose everything again. We've paid a high price for our loyalty to King Charles. My family's been here for 200 years. They've been judges, magistrates, sheriffs, and mayors in this town, and it comes down to this. The 3 of them sat down at the table. Dwayne said the prayer, and she served his thick stew in silence. A hurried knock at the door brought Dwayne to his feet. Who is it? Let me in, Dad, called a voice from outside. It's Miles, said Dwayne, as he lifted the drop bar for his son. Miles was out of breath, his chest heaving, and he looked grim. What is it, lad? What's happened? Miles dropped the bar behind him. Plague's broken out in the refugee camp. Oh no, cried Anne. It's only 2 years since the last one. We lost over 3,000 people that time and had to leave and let it run its course. We can't get away from here now. The 3 men stood looking at each other. They were very much alike. Short and wiry with dark curly hair and blue eyes. Don't worry about supper for me, Mom. I ate at the pub. Everybody's locking their doors. They sat around the table deep in thought. Plague again. It could last for months. It wasn't just the poor, it was everyone. The gruesome sight of the sick and dying vividly flooded back to her. The white faces with blackened noses and staring eyes. The begging black hands, the open sores on necks and legs, the bloody vomit. I shall never forget that fevered young woman. So thin she was, crying right out there on our front steps, begging for the Lord to take her, every movement of agony. We didn't dare open the door. It would have meant death for us. She was dead by morning. They took her body and just threw it on the wagon with the others and dumped their corpses into the bay. God knows, she said out loud. And they sat in silent prayer. I wonder sometimes if her ghostly was here. Later, Miles opened his violin case, and on cue, Dwayne went to get his. Miles paused momentarily to tune it and slipped it under his chin, drew the bow into those slow, lamenting strains of Away. And he watched and listened to her son play. It's good. His eyes were closed and his body was flowing with the melody. The bow arms smooth and sure. It was a haunting old song. So old it went back generations, often played at funerals, but always played for those leaving. It's the right one for tonight, she thought. She watched Dwayne caress the wood. Then he started to softly play a counter melody, later joining the tandem lament, the notes rising to a crescendo of grief, as only a violin could emote. Then in unison they slipped into a melancholy long and fading finale. Miles paused and put his fiddle down. Dad, I don't feel much like playing tonight. I pray for those souls out there. There's not much hope for them. I didn't have it in me to go down to the dock to see Strong and Fiona off. I said my goodbyes last night. I doubt I'll ever see them again. Whatever happens, they're better out of it. He sat hunched over, staring at the floor. She knew her boy was hurting. He had lost his betrothed in the last plague. Most of the girl's family had died too. Until now, that house had sat empty 2 streets over. It is likely filled with more victims tonight. Dwayne picked up his violin again and played softly into the night.